Now I'll move on to our next presentation of this session by Chapple from Friends of ANZAC Cottage. Chapple has had a lifelong fascination with history and heritage and enhanced this with an incorporation of history studies in her Bachelor of Education degree. Voluntarily, Anne has a strong involvement with the historic ANZAC Cottage in Mount Hawthorn. Anne has won several awards for her writing on the history of the cottage, as well as undertaking many presentations on this topic at conferences and historical groups. If you can please join me in welcoming Anne Chapple up to the stage.
Good afternoon, everyone. For those of you who are not familiar with the Friends of ANZAC Cottage, we're a group that works out of ANZAC Cottage in Mount Hawthorn, Kalgoorlie Street, Mount Hawthorn. It's a very small cottage, only 4 rooms really in it, and it was built in February 1916 in one day as a home for a returned wounded soldier and his family, and also as a memorial to those who fought at Gallipoli. And the soldier who actually received that cottage was my grandfather. Now, just this weekend, we saw the funeral of Arthur Leggett, a veteran, well, the last West Australian veteran who was a POW, prisoner of war, in World War II. And every time this happens, and it's not necessarily only with military people, every time this happens, stories are lost, attitudes are lost, even language gets lost. And we, all of us in this room, are really keen to recruit younger people and have them as part of our organisations. Now, one of the things about ANZAC Cottage is its story. The whole cottage, I feel, is heritage. It doesn't necessarily have a collection. Its heritage lies in the amazing story of this cottage that was built in one day by a community. Now, because it's a story, it's really, really important that that story is passed on and people understand the relevance and the importance of the story, because it teaches not only history, but it also gives you an insight into the human spirit. Now, I'm going to actually follow from Philippa, a lady who's taught me all I know about museums. Thank you. Thank you, Philippa. The Friends of ANZAC Cottage is a volunteer organisation. We have 11 members on our committee, and I'm really proud to say that 4 of those members are under 20. And then we have an extra 3 who are heading for their 40s. And our oldest is 90. So we have a very diverse stretch there. But it's interesting how they all get along and really help each other. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about how we recruited those volunteers and where we got them from. And now I'm not going to pretend that I'm no means an expert in this. I've stumbled, I've tried things that have failed spectacularly, but we have had some success, and that's what I'd like to tell you about today. So my first indication of the importance of younger people was when I was actually working in the southwest with a group that I was consulting with. Part of the project I was doing required me to get a list of members and to also list their skill sets. And I was very surprised to see that one of the members' skills was listed as being a teenager. So whilst we appreciate this so-called skill, It's probably the desire of all groups associated with museums, history houses and all of the rest, as we fear the future and the loss of knowledge and experience if the stories are not valued, learned, and the skill of passing the stories on is not taught, revered and continued. And that skill is definitely a skill of telling the story. Now, in a couple of experiences that I've had, it seems that there is sometimes a problem with connection. I once was teaching at Busselton TAFE, and I hit on the idea, because of my affiliation with museums, I was teaching tourism at the time. I was thinking that it would be good to get the students to go and visit the butter factory. So after a lot of faffing around, we actually got to the butter factory, but I was really surprised because of all of the students, and there were about 16 to 20 students, not one of them had ever been to the butter factory museum. And that sort of showed me that it's really important when people are asking, how do you recruit? You need to educate the community. The community are the people who are going to give you the volunteers. And the other people that you need to work with are the teachers of the schools and businesses, etc. It's actually, you need to work with these people so that they are aware. Now, we are very, very lucky, the Friends of ANZAC Cottage. We have a connection with the Mount Hawthorn Primary School that has existed for over a century. This connection started when the school children from that school were part of the construction of the cottage in 1916. They marched down Kalgoorlie Street and past the cottage. So we have worked with this connection very hard. So one of the things that we did was we instituted the Marjorie Williams ANZAC Cottage Bursary. Marjorie Williams was my mother, and she was the youngest daughter of Private Porter, and she loved ANZAC Cottage all of her life, and she worked to maintain the cottage in many ways. So this bursary has a monetary value, but is not very high, and it's awarded to a Year 6 student each year who displays the qualities attributed to ANZAC. We award at the graduation ceremony at the end of each year, and then it's re-rewarded on ANZAC Day at ANZAC Cottage. And also the bursary recipient plays a role in other services and ceremonies that we hold at the cottage. We now have the outcome of that is one of the bursary recipients is now a member of our committee. And that bursary is really, it's really valued by the school and by the community. The other way that we work with the school is we have instituted the ANZAC Cottage Writing Project. Every year we work with one of the teachers at the school, and the students, the Year 5 students, are invited to write a piece of writing of their own choice, and they submit this. From that work, then 6 are chosen, and those 6 children get to read their stories out as part of our ANZAC Day service. Another way that we worked with the school, I don't know if you're aware of our project called Operation ANZAC Revamp. This was when we worked over 2 bus stops that were adjacent to ANZAC Cottage and changed them so that they were virtually what we might call an everyday memorial. Now, how we involved the school in this. Firstly, the phase one of the project was, and you can't really see them, was to get sandbags. And I'm using sandbags because they weren't really sandbags, they were concrete bags. But this was a very complicated operation, and it actually involved getting a gentleman over from New Zealand, who's part of the New Zealand Army Force, and Australian Defence Forces working together to construct the sandbags. And what we organised was for students from the school to come down and deliver lunch to those students who were working on one of the days. And this was really successful. The kids were really grateful to be able to sit down and ask the workers all sorts of questions, etc., about their service. And there was one of the soldiers who had been deployed overseas, and so he was targeted with lots of questions. I would like to say too that this project really attracted the community, with people stopping to chat, and we had lots of people yelling from passing traffic. The school was also involved in the painting of the mural for the, you see up here, for the bus stops, and this was actually carried out at the school. So the artist, who was one of the guys with the cans, he painted the mural on the school grounds, and classes were encouraged to come and visit the work, or they could talk to the artist about the artwork and the subject during the actual painting of it. Other ways that we've involved the school was the commemorative ceremony when we had our 100th anniversary. And the other thing is that in return, we give to the school. So we have cooperated with when they have a school review of the communication with community and connection with community. So how do we engage with these young people apart from the school? We were very lucky in that Mount Hawthorn Primary has actually got ANZAC Cottage written into their school program. So the year ones, every year, part of their program is they come and visit ANZAC Cottage and are taught the story of the cottage. And that really resonates with them, although I must admit my self-esteem dropped a little when I was talking to year fives and said to them, do you remember coming to the school, to the cottage when you were 6? And yes, they did remember coming to the cottage when they were 6, and what they really remembered was playing pin the tail on the donkey. So I did wonder about my efficiency in telling the story. So we go to their ceremonies when they have an ANZAC Day or Remembrance Day service. We're always there. We have a time capsule that the children have all contributed to, and that brings lots of kids come back nagging at me about when we're going to open it so that they can see what they did. And the other thing is seeing their friends at the venue and taking an active role. We try very hard to include the younger generation in our services. So our buglers, for instance, on ANZAC Day and Remembrance Day have been children from the local schools or secondary schools. And as I said, children reading their stories as part of ANZAC Day. Other ways that we've enticed people is giving them something different. For instance, we have a Maori cultural group, and I can't pronounce it well, so please forgive me, Ngaru Pau, who come, they've been coming for years and I still haven't learned how to pronounce it properly. They've been coming to our Anzac Day because we like to keep the NZ in New Zealand. And that's something really different that people appreciate. The involvement. We try to involve them in activities that are somewhat different. We have, we've stopped doing it now, but we were having wreath-making workshops before the Anzac Day service, and the kids would make their own wreaths, and that meant that they were then part of the service. They would get to lay their wreaths at the flagpole. And also introducing them to old activities. Don't tell anyone else, but we did have tour a couple of years ago on Anzac Day. Now, the other way, and I've got to admit, we found it very difficult to break into the secondary schools, but it doesn't mean that we're not trying. But we have had a few things, is connecting. One of the best ways, I think, is connecting with like-minded organisations. For instance, Scouts. We had a group of Scouts come along and they gave out lemon and cupcakes on the verge, and that was a fundraising thing for them, and it also helped us because lots of kids came along to talk to those kids. Cadets, we've used cadets for military tasks such as standing guard, flag raising, etc. Sporting groups, we once had a couple of footballers worked on maintaining a table. And of course, a lot of the secondary schools have community programs where the students are obliged to do some community work. Our biggest success to date has been connection with the Premier's Anzac Student Tour. For those not familiar with that, each year the students from the secondary schools are asked to write an essay, and from those essays, a group of, say, 10 to 15 students are chosen, and they go on a tour to different locations. This year they've just come back from Japan, and on those tours they're taken to places that have military significance, etc. And as you can see, they have part of the Anzac, what is called the Anzac photo. Any group that comes to Anzac Cottage gets taken with this very special Anzac flag. Now, there's another group. So this group comes to the cottage annually on their pre-tour group, and they always seem to really love coming to the cottage. And in questioning the things that they like, they value the authenticity. They really like the fact that I tell them the story because I'm the granddaughter of the participant. And they like the connection and relevance, the passion and the motivation. One of those, the gentleman standing there, Sasha, has now joined our committee, and he is absolutely wonderful with his ideas, etc. And he has now joined our committee. We also, because the Premier's Anzac Tour people come from all sorts of places, we have Zoom meetings, just not on a regular basis, just whenever. And we ask for ideas, and we always act on the ideas, even if it's just part of an idea. For instance, one of the past is the abbreviation. One of the past students had suggested that we investigate getting a silver coin struck for our 110th anniversary, which is coming up, and she has volunteered to work with me on investigating and getting this organised. So just quickly, It's a painstaking process, and a lot of things that people forget about is that younger people have time commitments too. For instance, young Sasha that I just talked about, he goes to uni. He's been on overseas trips. He's got social life. But even when he was in Denmark, he did a Zoom into our AGM, which shows commitment. Okay, and what's our reward? Our reward is the joy that we get out of it. One child said to me, this is my grandfather's remembrance stone. A child said to me, is there a body under there? And I said, not yet. And this beautiful painting was done by a little kid from Carrinup Primary School of our sunset service. So we get a lot of joy out of it. And I'd just like to leave you with this saying. Young people, I happen to believe, are the world's most precious natural resource. Thank you, everyone.
Fantastic. We can just get you to stay up on the stage. We'll now enter our question and answer period. So while I do a refresh of our online platform for questions, are there any questions that are coming directly from the audience? If you can please raise your hand, we'll get a microphone out to you. We've got one at the back here.
Hi, great work that you're doing. Do you teach the Aboriginal side of how Aboriginal soldiers were treated after the war as well?
We haven't yet, mainly because I have no knowledge. I have researched the Mount Hawthorn area I have researched the Mount Hawthorn area, but I haven't gone that far as yet.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just a reminder to our online participants, if you do have a question, make sure you enter it into the platform. And I'm keeping an eye on things here, so if you do ask a question, we'll be sure to pose it right away. Any other questions from within the room? Ask one, go ahead.
It's a very basic question, but how did they build a brick house in one day?
I'm blowed if I know, I wasn't there. It was, to be honest, they built the shell of the outside of the cottage. They came back on weekends later and did all the interior plastering, painting, floorboard, ceiling type things. So, but even so, when you think about 1916 and the equipment that they would have had, it is a pretty good day, and it was also 38 degrees on that day, so it was hot. And my favourite thing about it is the Ladies' Patriotic Guild, who were just marvellous, made sure that all of the workers had a lovely hot lunch.
Yeah, I was just curious, why or how was your grandfather chosen to receive the house?
He was the first returned wounded soldier from Gallipoli to live in Mount Hawthorn. So he was the first one to live in the suburb. He was wounded, depending on which record you read, on either the 25th of April 1915 or the 26th of April. So he was on the second ship that came back from Gallipoli. But he and my grandmother lived there until they both died. And since then, the cottage has had numerous owners because it cannot be sold. It's part of the agreement that it can't be sold.
Any other questions from the floor? If not, I've got one. I'm going to take my not-for-profit hat and put my tour operator hat on. And it was great to hear that you were involved in tourism earlier on in your career. As a tour operator, have you explored options of working with local tour operators to bring a wider range of visitors to the cottage, to see it, I guess, on a more frequent basis, so that people from either outside of Perth City or from outside of the state or outside of the country can have a chance to look at the cottage as well?
Not really. We do try to advertise as widely as we can for nothing. The cupboard is bare, unfortunately. But we've done things like we brought James Blundell, for those of you who don't know, he's a country singer, over for our centenary anniversary when we turned 100. And he actually wrote a song for the cottage, and that song was played all over Australia. We actively work with groups from other areas. For instance, we are a member of the Gallipoli Association in the UK, and our ex-president, who's still on the committee, is a Kiwi, and so we have connections with New Zealand as well.
Fantastic, thank you. We do have some time left if there are any other questions from the floor. Just having a quick look, just one just right here.
Thank you very much. Interesting question you had. And that leads me to the stories. You're saying that you don't have any budget. Have you thought about just simply using your phone, putting somebody in to ask questions up to 10, 15 minutes and throwing them on social media or on YouTube? These create amazing things that can be brought into the reasons how Aboriginals were not treated as humans when they got back, all the way through to your grandfather. And these are not hard to do. They literally can be done so easily on today's mobile phone, and as long as it's an Apple.
Oh, right. Well,
YouTube is free. It's owned by Google.
Right.
The Google Maps is owned by Google, and it's free. Social media, free. And just little stories you think, oh, that's interesting now, but in a year's time, you've got 52 stories if you do one a week. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I will say that during COVID, our ANZAC Day services were cancelled, and so we ran around and got all of the speakers together, and we did a Facebook version, video version of our ANZAC service. And we've got a lovely photo of Peter, our president at the time, standing in his backyard using the bin as a lectern, wearing very colourful board shorts and delivering his presidential speech at the time. So we have tried, but we are relying on our younger people to give us more insight into that. So thank you very much for that idea.
Probably time for one more. Can we squeeze one more out? One more question out here? Otherwise, oh, there we go. Thank you for jumping in at the last minute.
I heard that you, one of the things that people responded to was authenticity.
Yes.
And the fact that you're speaking from your own family story. Is there anyone to take on that authentic role going forward?
Yes. Both of my daughters are involved, and they know the story as I did from my mother's knee, and they've lived through the story and get dragged in to do all sorts of voluntary things, as families do. If I can just take 1 minute to tell you a funny story about ANZAC Cottage. When I first met my husband and I mentioned about ANZAC Cottage and what I had to do with it, he, with dollar signs in his eyes, thought I meant ANZAC House. So thought he was marrying into money. He's been a very disappointed man for many, many years.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your presentation. If we can have a big round of applause. Again, thank you so much for the presentation today.